House Appropriations Subcommittee on Environmental, Great Lakes, and Energy will come to order. Chair, will you please call the roll for today's attendance?
Chair Cavett.
Here.
Representative Borton. Representative Markkinen. Representative Steckloff.
Present.
Representative Price.
Here.
Mr. Chair, 3 of 5 subcommittee members are present. A quorum of the subcommittee is present.
Okay. Let's see. We're going to wait to approve the minutes, I believe, until a little bit. Is that okay, Austin? Appropriate? Okay. All right. Well, today, appreciate division of, sorry about that, everyone. We have Division Chief Mike Neller with us today, Director of Remediation and Redevelopment Division from Eagle. And if you're ready and all set, we're looking forward to your presentation today. Thanks for being here.
Afternoon, everyone. Same drills last time. Travis Pascal, Deputy Director with the agency. Mike knows what he's talking about today, so I'll let him introduce himself and run us through our cleanup programs that his division oversees.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here. Again, my name is Mike Neller. I'm the Division Director for the Remediation Redevelopment Division of Eagle. I've been in that position for a little over 5 years. So today, what we're going to do is I'm going to try and provide you an overview of our environmental programs that Remediation Redevelopment Division manages for the state, illustrate some of the challenges we face, and maybe help you understand the importance of consistent funding for these programs. This is an overview slide of the different sections or areas that are housed within the division. I'm sure it's not unlike some of the other divisions you've seen. Besides our 10 district offices that are spread around the state, we have our infrastructure of administration, geological services, technical support, information management, and then the Eagle Laboratory is housed within my division. I did want to mention something about the Eagle Laboratory that most people don't understand is, besides testing drinking water and environmental samples for the state, it also runs a lab certification program where we certify drinking water labs throughout the state of Michigan that perform drinking water compliance testing for contaminants related to regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Here you see the 4 programs that are managed within under my division. 3 are state-run programs mandated by Michigan law, and the last one there, and I'll talk about each one of these separately, but Superfund is a federal program which is under the CERCLA Act within EPA, where Michigan provides both oversight and partnership with the EPA for the Superfund program. So if you're a Superfund site, you're also, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, you're considered on the National Priority List, or NPL. So first of all, Part 201 of the state's Natural Resources Environmental Protection Act addresses releases of hazardous substances to the environment from various industrial and commercial operations. So this is to be a little bit more specific, this is what gets released into the ground. So this isn't something that goes into a surface water body or into the air, but into the ground. In managing this program, we are tasked to meet the statutory requirement to protect public health and the environment. Of these sites that have exceeded some criteria under Part 201, we have approximately 18,000 sites in our inventory throughout the state. Many are decades old, where the liable party is long gone. Part 213, under the state's Natural Resource Environmental Program, is our leaking underground storage tank program. This provides the framework for dealing with releases from leaking underground storage tank, which are, for all intent and purposes, always from a gas station. So one misnomer here that I like to point out, because the name is leaking underground storage tank, which kind of gives people the impression that it's an ongoing release and the tank is continuing to leak. That's not what the program is. These are releases that happen at one point in time. So if the release is still open, that means it hasn't been fully evaluated to determine the risk level where it could be closed out. But it's not an ongoing process. We have about just under 8,000 open releases currently in our inventory. Again, most of these are more than 2 decades old, and they are, for most part, are orphan sites, and they're no longer part of an operating gas station. We also manage the Brownfield Redevelopment Program. This program, as I'm guessing you already know, provides grants, loans, and tax incremental financing for both Part 201 and 213 sites. These funds are provided to promote redevelopment and economic development regardless of the existence of a liable party. So we pay only for environmental costs associated with the development. So this isn't, you're not going to get money through the Brownfield program to pay for the building. It's only to deal with any of the contamination or to make sure that all those exposure pathways have been dealt with. We think this is important because it levels the playing field for any economic development for those that are choosing sites that maybe do not have contamination in them. And the last one is the Superfund, which is part of the, we operate under the CERCLA, which is the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. So there are currently 64 Michigan sites on the Superfund National Priority List. Since its inception in the 90s, 22 sites have been deleted. These sites are the worst of the contamination. Normally that's why EPA is involved, because they have more resources and authorities than we do in the state. These are long-term remediation efforts. The average time a site is on the NPL is 40 years. And they're going to cost tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. Besides providing our staff that provide both oversight and cooperation with the EPA to work on these sites, we have a 10% share cost that we pay to match the federal dollars that go towards remediating these sites. I did want to touch upon one definition that you may hear, the term orphan site. So those are sites that there's no longer a entity or a liable party, that either they're long gone or maybe they don't even have the financial means anymore to pay for the costs associated with remediating the site. They still need to be cleaned up because they could pose a risk to public health and the environment. So this could be through a variety of exposure pathways, volatilization to indoor air pathway, drinking water pathway. If it gets into the groundwater and contaminates people's wells, it could make its way into a surface water body, and then direct contact with the soil could potentially also be an exposure pathway. So this is our universe. So this is a map of all the sites that fall either under Part 201 or Part 213. So there's about 27,000 known sites of contamination that exceed the criteria. So this map is a little bit ominous. So you should understand that even though it may technically be a facility because it has exceeded criteria, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is being exposed, because it could be a vacant lot. It could be maybe there's some metals in the dirt, but nobody's in that space. They're not being exposed, and so it's not going to be a high priority to deal with those sites. The principal way that we find out about new facilities is there's a process called baseline environmental assessments, BEAs as they're referred to. Anytime there's a property transaction, the owner would do a initial inquiry, and if they think there's contamination there, they fill out the baseline environmental assessment process, and that relieves them of any liability for cleaning up that contamination, because they weren't there when it happened, they're buying the property, so, but they do still have due care to make sure that nobody's being exposed. So we get about 1,200 of those a year, and about half of those are new sites that we never knew about. So often I get asked in these settings, like, well, when's that number gonna go down? Not quickly, I can tell you that, because we're getting about 600 new ones a year. So, and again, these sites to remediate take a long time too. We also use a classification in these, each one of these sites, and this helps us prioritize the work. They could be in the highest priority of the highest classification is risk, present, and immediate. So below that would be like risk, long-term, short-term, could be risk is contained, and so on. But the highest priority that we look at first is risk, present, and immediate.
Apologize to interrupt. Could you give us an example of maybe the least and then the most pressing on those?
Yeah, like the present immediate, we know there's a release. We know it could be like a vinyl chloride release that's spreading in the groundwater, and we need to make sure that we deal with that so it doesn't spread any further, contaminate any other groundwater, potentially people's drinking water wells. There might be a surface water body nearby, whether that's a lake, stream, river, but that would rise to, you know, present and immediate. We need to get on those as quickly as possible. The lower ones would be, you know, and you see this a lot in urban areas because it's not uncommon, like in Detroit, to see there's just residue from the industrial environment there of metals. They may pose a direct contact risk. You know, if you touch it or you ingest it in your mouth, like the principle would be, you know, lead is an example of that kind of thing. But if that place is fenced off and it's not being used, then that's probably not a big issue or priority to get on that one first. I'll go through our process here in a second about how we evaluate what sites we can work on. Ready? Okay. So of the risk present immediate, of those 27,000, there's, you know, this number changes daily, but, you know, there's about 1,100 of those sites that are classified as risk present and immediate. So this initial assessment, again, is based on the BEA, which is not a comprehensive evaluation of the site. And so sometimes it's not uncommon if we go and we collect some more data that it may change categories. It may not be risk present and immediate, but that's our first cut on it, and so that drives our decision making. As far as addressing the risks, there are about a little over 1,700 sites that are actively being worked on, remediated, contained, and they're both a combination of Part 201 and 213 sites. So this could include both state-funded work on sites, plus it includes liable parties remediating these sites where we provide oversight on the actions taken there. This 1,700 sites that are being actively worked on, that comprises about 6% of the total inventory of contaminated sites. So here's our process. Every year we do what's called an action plan review. We look at the sites that fall into the based on their risk category. We look at the authority for funding that we have available. A lot of these sites, you know, are not remediated or taken care of in 6 months to a year. So there's a lot of these sites that are going to be on there year after year after year, and so we look at what's needed to continue. We try and project out how much money we think we're going to need to deal with the entire site to remediate it or contain it or to get to where nobody's being exposed, and we're in a good position there. Ideally, we would like to close that site with no further action, but that's often hard to do. So we do have. So this is the process. We look at those risk categories, we look at what's available, and then we make decisions. So we do not have unlimited resources, so sometimes we have to make some decisions based on what we think is the greater risk. Sometimes we make decisions based on a containment action versus an actual full remediation, because we would basically spend our whole budget on one site if we tried to remediate it completely. So this is part of the challenge that we have with these sites. We also do, there's a footnote there, that we do work with local units of government as part of our decision-making process. So it's pretty common, especially in urban areas, although we do have, we work with some of the sites or some of the municipalities up north and in the UP. If they have property that, you know, is used to have some sort of industrial commercial operation there that's no longer there, and they're looking to redevelop it. So if that's on our list, you know, we compare lists with them, and so if that's one of their sites that they're hoping the area they're gonna redevelop, then that may change what we're gonna do as far as helping them out to get that place to a point where they can, or that site to a point where they can put some sort of business or even residential development on that site. So currently we have over $300 million allocated to 787 sites. So that's money that could be over the course of, you know, 5+ years, but that's money that we imagine that we are gonna need to deal with these sites. On average, we're spending about $600 million in site expenditures and these are orphan sites. And then, of course, the brownfield program, and this is you know, that's an average for the last 7 years, 185 projects supported, $123 million in grants, and $41 is the average return on investment for the brownfield program. So we think that's a great program. We think it's a win-win for everybody when we're doing that. This gives you a feel for the number of sites, and these are orphan sites, right? So this is state expenditures on RD sites, and you can see that the number that we're working on is going up, has been going up over the last almost 10 years. Prior to 2016, we were working on less than 200 sites for state-funded work. So what has made this happen is, one, we've had a consistent flow of resources, money to these programs, which allow us to stay with sites. If we have to start or stop a site, then, and you stop for, say, 5-10 years, you come back, you almost have to start over. Plus, if it's groundwater plume, it's probably gone even farther. So, and then the costs, of course, have gone up. So, but those were decisions that were made at the time based on limited resources. We also feel like in the last couple of years, we put things in place that have made us more efficient. And so you can see a big jump there between 2023 and 2024. And then that last bar there, that's just after the first quarter. So we think we're making good progress. We feel it's important that, you know, when the taxpayers and as authorized by the legislature gives us funds, that we should show progress, and we should be efficient and effective as possible in dealing with these sites. Of course, we always have to, you know, meet our mandate of protecting public health and the environment, but we're supposed to be good stewards of the state's money. I did want to talk about the LUS program. So you can see here, this is a chart of the number of open releases by state. And you can see that there are 4 big spikes there: New Jersey, Florida, Illinois, and Michigan. And that comprises about 90% of all the open sites in the United States. So Michigan, 2 years ago, we were number 1. We're not trying to be number 1 in this case. And so we've made some significant changes into our way we're organized, the way we process these sites, some of our policies for evaluating the exposure pathways to be more in line with the national standards. And so we made some significant improvements. That number right there you see was 8,139. That was in October. We are now below 8,000. That's the first time we've been below less than 8,000 releases in the state of Michigan since 1992. 3 years ago, we set a closure goal because we were closing roughly 100-ish open releases a year. We set a closure goal of 400 closures a year. It took us a little bit of time to get there because we had to make a lot of, like I said earlier, organizational and policy changes. This last year in 2024, we closed 428. The interesting thing is between 2023 and 2024, we only spent 6% more money. So, and we're on track this year to close 550 sites, and that I expect that to be even higher than that. I talked about this. It's important that we have consistent, stable funding. It allows us to do long-term planning. If we have to guess every year if the money's going to be there or not, then it's difficult for us to, deal with some of these sites that can take years, if not decades, to completely remediate. Again, I talked about we don't starts and stops. That's basically you just threw that money away, in my opinion. And we want to. It helps us increase the economic development opportunities working with the local units of government. So there is a cycle of contamination. We know that if we don't get on this stuff, it's just going to get more and more costly. Cleanup costs will go up. Number of people will likely affected will likely grow. Groundwater resources continue to be at risk, and today's problem just gets bigger tomorrow.
I'm going to jump in with just a couple other issue areas I knew were of interest. So these are maybe not necessarily focused just in Mike's division, but are relevant to some of this work. So first one is the Michigan Underground Storage Tank Authority, affectionately known as MUSTA. And fun fact, I think there are at least 2 people in the room who probably remember when I left working for a legislative office in this building in 2015. This is the first place I worked when I came over to the agency about 10 years ago. So MUSTA was created in 2014 through legislative amendments to NAREPA. It provides 2 kind of key functions to the state of Michigan. So it's funded by an earmark out of the refined petroleum fee, which is a penny that y'all pay on a gallon of gasoline or actually it's paid at the wholesale, so it's before the pump. But $20 million a year comes into the MUSTA program, and it provides this service. So one, it functions as the federally required financial assurance mechanism that underground storage tank owner and operators have to have because of the dangers associated with having those systems and the potential for release. And then also, it essentially acts as an insurance fund. So if there's a release, it's not due to negligence. There's all these factors built into the statute. It helps pay for the costs of those cleanups. So as of the end of last fiscal year, MUSTA was functioning as the insurance mechanism for 65% of the facilities in the state of Michigan, and that means that they're not going out and having to buy private insurance or a private bond at what often becomes pretty expensive prices. So that is MUSTA. And then I wanted to touch briefly on Renew Michigan, or you'll see it, I think, in the budget line as Renewing Michigan's Environment. Came about at in 2018, at the end of 2018, and it was put in place as a way to replace the expiring Clean Michigan Initiative bond. That was a $675 million voter-approved bond, and now I'm forgetting if it's 1998, so the end of the 1990s, that funded a lot of the work in Mike's programs, as well as some of the other areas within the department, and that was the way the legislature at that time saw fit to fund some of the processes that we do. So state-funded cleanups like Mike talked about, the state match on Superfund programs, brownfield redevelopment grants and loans, but other areas throughout the department too, right? So surface water monitoring that we do around the state to keep tabs on contamination in our lakes and streams, recycling and waste management, many of those. So Renew came in at the end of 2018 to replace that. It's $69 million a year, It has those three really broadly defined categories that the department can spend funds in. The legislature's also appropriated FTEs out of that. So some of the things it funds is not only staff programming and capacity within the agency. We've been very thankful for that. It's given us an ability to really move forward, but also, again, state-funded cleanup actions at some of those sites, brownfield grants and loans. We've continued that water monitoring that we were doing that provides that crucial service. There's also a pretty extensive materials management and recycling grant program that runs out of Renew as well. So again, important funding for Mike to make sure that we don't have to stop progress on some of these sites, but also programming around the work that we do. So with that, we are ready to take any questions y'all have on what you saw today.
All right, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Director, for being here today. There you are, Hayden. Just a couple quick questions. One, my district is northern Michigan. I'm looking at the counties, and I see there's some leaking underground tanks all throughout my district. How can I get more information on the status of those projects?
As far as whether they're active or what?
Yeah, exactly. You know, what's being done, what's being proposed?
Well, we could set up a briefing for you to show you which one of those tanks is releases is actively being worked on or not being worked on. Yeah, and again, they all take different shapes, and as far as, like I said, most of them are over 20 years old. The interesting thing about petroleum is it generally doesn't pose much of a risk. The biggest risk is contaminating groundwater, and then
Okay.
people are drinking it, right? So, but petroleum it gets eaten by the microbes and the bugs, and both in the water and the soil, so it biodegrades. So even if we did nothing over a period of time, after 40, 50 years, it's probably gone.
Okay.
So,
I'll get together with you that.
But we'd be happy to go
Get a
through the
report on
specifics
it or
with you.
something.
Yeah.
All right, and my other one, just simply on some of the more serious cases throughout the state, and I know you've got a lot of them. What role does staff play in some of the serious cases? Are they there daily monitoring progress?
Probably not daily. It depends. I mean, the way this, it depends on the exposure pathway. It depends if they're monitoring some sort of vapor intrusion into a building. But again, those samplings happen over a period of time where we collect data, say quarterly, like for groundwater. If you're trying to monitor some dissolved contaminant in the groundwater, then we would place the wells, and they would collect samples in all likelihood, maybe monthly, if they're still trying to figure out which way it's going or how fast it's expanding. So they wouldn't be there every day. It's not like if we had some gas released in this building that we need somebody in here every hour taking samples until we know it's clear. So it doesn't move that fast.
All right, thank you, Director, and thank you, Chair.
Can I just add one thing to that for you, Representative Borton? So I think one of the things to help draw a picture in your mind of what this looks like, right? Two kind of categories of sites. We have orphan sites and we have responsible party sites. And what the department's involvement in that work looks very different depending on if it's an orphan site or responsible party site. If it's a responsible party site, if there is somebody who was the source of the contamination and they have the statutory requirement to be addressing it, I'll be frank with all of you here, the department may not have much insight about exactly what they're doing on an ongoing basis at that site. That's how the law is set up in Part 201 of NAREPA. It's a self-implementing cleanup program where it says they have to make sure that folks aren't getting exposed, but there's not a terrific amount in that law that says you have to provide this information to the department, you have to keep them updated on your progress, you have to demonstrate that folks aren't exposed. So understand that. I think that's important, and set that aside. When we have those sites where we do have involvement, our job there is we're looking over the shoulder of the owner-operator and their consultant and looking at the work they're doing, the samples that they're collecting, the soil that they're excavating, the vapor mitigation system, the vacuum they're putting under that building, and we're trying to assess from our professional standpoint, are those effective to prevent risk, to cut off that exposure pathway. So now if there's a catastrophic incident, right, catastrophic as in it happens very quickly, very suddenly, and it's very visible, like a giant diesel release, then of course we have staff that are out there. They're there during the recovery. We're advising that cleanup, that type of thing. But these programs, the movement of contamination through groundwater, that doesn't, it's not screaming hot, like flying along really fast, right? Groundwater might move inches or feet a year. And so I think when Mike talked about samples happening on a monthly basis, that's how we start to get out there and we define, where is this plume? How deep is it down in that groundwater? How far is it moving? Where are the edges of it? And where are those potential sensitive receptors, right? Drinking water wells, people living in homes, that type of thing that we need to look out for. So I think that's, I just wanted to add a little context there. Yeah.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Kind of piggybacking up on Rep. Borton there, I'm looking at the Understanding the Universe map, and I see that a lot of the sites follow the Antrim Shelf. Are all of those considered, is every well considered a site?
I'm kicking myself here, Mr. Chair, because I sat here with Adam last week and I looked at the map of our oil and gas wells, and then last time, and when Mike put this map up, I said, well, that looks sure like it follows that same line. So I'll get you an answer on that. I do not expect that just the presence of an oil and gas well makes it a Part 201 site on this map. My expectation is there was contamination that happened at some point. Some oil spilled, a valve broke. There was a release that occurred. So we know that this was a site of contamination at some point. We may or may not know the cleanup status of that. So that's what my expectation is, but I'll try to confirm that for you.
Okay, thank you. I know that there's been a significant amount of money invested in this program since COVID. Is there some highlights or some things that, something that's, some achievements that you've had that you'd like to point out? I know you talked a little bit about some of the things you've done, but what are some of the things you've done with the extra funding that you've received over the since COVID?
Well, in some cases, it's allowed us to take on projects that have been, we've been in a containment strategy for some time. I can tell you that there's a site here in Mason, Michigan. It's a chemical manufacturer that had contamination released, 20 years ago, and we've been basically just containing it within the site itself so it doesn't reach the nearby surface water body. But now we have the additional money, some money's available so that, historically what would happen is if we wanted to put, $4 or $5 million on one site, that meant that 20 other sites were not going to be dealt with. So some of this additional money has given us greater flexibility. And so for Americhem, one, we have a new technology that we're going to be employing. Two, we can spend a couple $1 million on that site, and hopefully within the next 3 years, that site will be completely remediated. So there's also some of the where, although municipalities can apply for revolving fund money to do municipal water hookups, in some cases it's not timely or they haven't been able to do that, but we've been able to spend some of these funds to protect the people up in Grayling, near the Camp Grayling Air National Guard base, by providing money for municipal water. So those are two examples. I could give you more if you want.
Okay. Go ahead.
I think Mike's neglecting to toot his own horn on a couple of things that the division started doing under him that might seem a little not directly aligned with the cleanup, but I think have been really important for our understanding and then strategically how we move forward, right? So he showed you that map of the sites that are categorized as immediate and present risk. Well, the reason that map exists, I don't know, you go back 5 years or so, we had 11,000 sites in that inventory that we didn't know what the risk was at those sites. And that freaks me out. I'll tell you that. Like not having any insight. And that's, again, it's a product of the statute and of what we're assigned to do. We get these environmental assessments in. There's no requirement to review them. It's basically a way for people to protect themselves from liability. They go and they sit there, and there's some information about contamination at that site, right? They might have sunk a monitoring well, something like that. So we had 11,000 sites that had no risk condition assigned to them. So under Mike and his team's leadership, we brought on a team funded with our contaminated site money, a team of contractors, trained them, and then over the past couple of years, year and a half, have categorically gone through all of those sites and assigned them to a risk category based on information in that environmental assessment. So then now we can know, where do we need to prioritize things, right? Are there sites that are immediate and present risk that are orphan sites that we need to get out and take a look at as a state? And it might just be going out and getting our eyes on it for the first time in the history of the state. It might be sinking a couple wells to understand the contamination. And then vice versa, are there sites immediate and present risk where there's a responsible party, and we need to get in touch with that responsible party and understand what they're doing to address those. So I think that's been it's been like a game changer for how we can look at those things funded out of that and move forward that way.
Thank you. Another question before I open up to my colleagues here real quick. Curious, the Army Corps had asked Eagle to do put some guidelines together relative to PFAS and dredging. Are we making any progress on that, or where are we at on it? Where is that? Could you just give us a rough overview real quick?
Yeah, and I'm going to probably, Chair, have you grab Sydney after this to have that discussion. She's been much, much closer to that conversation than I have.
Sydney, would you like to come address the committee, or?
Do you want to pop up?
I'm very curious, so thank you for accommodating me. Thank you, Sydney. Tell us who you are real quick, Sydney, for the record.
Good afternoon. I'm Sydney Hart, Legislative Liaison for the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. So your question was, what are we doing about the guidance as far as
Well, there's a lot of concern about dredging. I represent a lot of waterfront communities, and they're just very curious on where we're at with, I don't know if I call it a dictate, but the Army Corps of Engineers asked us to develop a strategy on how we're going to deal with PFAS and dredging, possibly missing a dredging season this year because we don't have it available in a timely manner. So I'm just curious where we're at in that process.
Yeah, so I'll provide a little bit of background. So our team has been working internally with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers since I think October of 2024 on this. Army Corps asked us for guidance on how we would like to assign water quality standards to PFAS dredging for the sediment sampling. And so they've been working on that guidance. We actually had a long-standing meeting in place last week with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers where that guidance was shared. We've also put together a virtual legislative briefing for impacted harbors and the associated legislative districts. We'll be doing that next Monday at 4 p.m. And so the members who have harbors in their districts that are impacted have received that invitation. Happy to open that up to folks that don't necessarily have those impacted harbors. But ultimately, that guidance was shared. It seemed overall well received by the Detroit district, but ultimately they'll need to take that up to their headquarters to ensure that they can get the necessary approvals in the funding to do the sediment samplings at the associated spots. Not all of those sites that we've identified, so of the 69 sites that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has outlined for upcoming dredging, I think it's somewhere around 17 of those sites were identified by our team as near associated PFAS sites in the district, so we have around 300 of those. And so due to the proximity, there's an elevated risk for PFAS. And ultimately, we just want to ensure that depending on the disposal method that's being used, whether that be the sand is being reintroduced into the Great Lakes or used as beach nourishment, or if there's PFAS identified in that sand, instead of it contaminating potentially surface water, it is instead used and sent to a containment area that would essentially stop or limit the risk of PFAS exposure to public health.
Thank you. I appreciate your willingness to come up. Appreciate it. Rep. Steckloff.
Thank you, Chair Cavett. Some questions just to clarify. You said that 90% of the funding for remediation for contaminated sites comes from the federal government and the state pays 10%?
That's for the CERCLA Superfund program.
Okay, it's just for the program.
Just for that program. So we have a cost share that we pay 10%, and that's about $8 million a year on average.
Okay, and the remediation sites, you said you get like $313 for cleanups. That was able to do 787 sites, and that was for a 6-year span.
Yeah, that's authorized, so we're allocated money. So that's based on the number of sites. When we look at those sites and we evaluate how much money we think you're gonna have to spend to remediate that site, that's what that number is. We haven't spent it yet, and then over the period of, every year while we're working on a site, well, that's what that expenditure is. So the $60 million a year is basically on average what we've been spending on to work on sites.
Do we have any idea, we're obviously seeing a lot of cuts that are happening in the federal government. 40% of our budget comes from the federal government. With almost $1 trillion cut in Medicaid, I think some of my greatest concerns have to do with the public health aspect of these remediation sites. If we were forced to move funding to backfill so many of our public health operations or for our schools, what is the gravity for public health situation if we cannot fund so many of these cleanup sites? And how many cleanup sites, public health wise, would you suggest must be done within the next 5 years?
Well, I would just go to the risk present immediate number.
Okay.
And so that's the only way I can really, talk intelligently about, what I think is what may a good number or, the guess. So if you assume that, then you should assume that the risk of somebody being exposed, which it could impact their public health, is the greatest there. So if we can't work on those sites and at least contain or mitigate the exposure risk, then, I don't know how to, evaluate or quantify the level of impact, but that's the risk. That's always the risk, and that's why some of these sites have continued to be on the books, because we made decisions over the years to spread the money around to just try and contain the spread or to mitigate the exposure risk, but not actually clean it up.
Got it.
So again,
Got it.
but
Yeah.
again, you're going to pay that money tenfold over, the longer you wait on something.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
One point I'll add on that too, that's been one of the benefits of the increased contaminated site funding that we've had, is it allows us to take a chance or take an evaluation of, are we being penny wise and pound foolish on some of these sites, right? So, a discussion from earlier, is there a site where we're paying $1 million a year every single year to keep running this vapor mitigation system? But if we just spent $8 million right now, removed as much of that source out, then we don't have to worry about that anymore. I think to your point, if somehow federal funding went away for the Superfund program, which is not something I currently fear, it's nothing I have rumors about, we'd have to shift away from a lot of those sites that Mike's talking about us working on. A lot of the funding in these programs, almost all of it, is restricted funding, right? Law says, legislature, you got to appropriate it for this purpose. So that's somewhat secure, but we still have to shift away from where we're doing work elsewhere.
Thank you. Rep. Price?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. Thank you, too, for talking about how this part of Eagle also overlaps so much with public health and with economic development. I understand from meeting with your department that one of the major ongoing projects right now at Eagle is to digitize records to make the permitting process and responding to FOIA requests more efficient. And I'm wondering, how important is that digitization to the function and efficiency of the department?
Well, we think it's pretty huge. We think it's important that we enter the 21st century. I can only speak specifically about my division, and we have jumped into this effort with both feet, and now the entire department is using us as a model, if I might be so bold to say that, to try and digitize all of the other divisions' records. It's just, there's so many factors to this, one being space. I mean, most of our records were in these file boxes. We literally had, if you stacked them end to end, we had 15 miles of boxes. So, and the big goal here, when we can put these now in our database, which is public facing. So the department gets about 20,000 FOIAs a year. I think 18,000 of those come to my division, and they're mainly consultants trying to get the records on these sites so they can build their baseline environmental assessment. So if it's there on RIDE, and we have over, I think it's a little higher now, 1.5 million documents, okay, and a document is not one page. So that could just be, the documents on a site, so that are now available to the public, and it's very easy to get in there. So what we see is, one, the cost savings to both our staff that doesn't have to process the FOIA, the cost savings to the consultants that don't have to pay for it. We also are seeing it's more time efficient for them because they can go in and they can look for what they're looking for, and if they don't see it in there because it hasn't been scanned in, they can be more directive in what they're asking for in their FOIA. They don't have to say, well, just give me everything you got on this site. So our FOIAs for us are down about 20%. And we expect that number to just keep going down. And so this is a huge cost savings and time saver, and just a transparency issue for anybody who wants to look at the data that's on these contaminated sites.
Do you know offhand how your response time to developers has changed as in terms of the effects of digitization?
I don't know as far as the response time. I know some consultants have told me that, what used to take them, days to try and put together, look at files, now is taking them hours. So my staff doesn't really like it when I look at these site files, so I'm probably just know enough now to be dangerous, so I can dig around in there and ask enough questions to irritate them. So, so I find it, I personally find it very useful. I also think it's some of that increase that you saw in the number of sites, all of our financials are embedded within our database. The public can't see those, but we can. And so project managers can track their budgets, their schedule. It makes the transparency on how we're doing for us is just so much greater. It's very powerful. So, and then just the amount of space that we have that we're freeing up in office buildings is pretty huge.
And do you need any more resources from the state in order to continue with those efforts?
Well, I don't think, I'm going to leave that up to Travis. I never turn down resources.
Thank you. Thanks, Rep. Price.
Thank you.
Real quick, did I hear you say that your division's finished your side of it? You've kind of become a standard for the rest of the department?
No, we're not done. We're not done. We're for the most part, we've got I think all the 213 site files from the districts have been digitized. We still have some areas that need to be digitized. All of our Superfund files are not. They have a huge amount of files, and then we have a lot of files still being stored at the record center that aren't in either Con Hall or the district offices. So we just did a process improvement evaluation and we're trying to get to assembly line process. We upgraded our scanners and we're employing some technology that will redact documents, and that's not a manual function anymore. And so we think we're going to go from, hey, we'll be done in 10 or 15 years to maybe we'll be done in 5.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. I'm grateful for your presence today. You put on a good program. Thank you. All right, if Vice Chair Borton could approve the minutes from earlier, and if Rep. Stepklos could approve all the absent members. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.